You are listening to Exploring Sacred with your host, Denise Albano Francisco, on the Temple Within Radio and Digital Media Network, giving voice to the sacred.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful Wednesday. It's an amazing day and a beautiful day this morning already. Todd and I were out taking care of our new little girl, Athena, out in the enchanted forest. Apparently there has been a kitten that's been living out in the forest for these past many months, and about 3 weeks ago she found us and adopted us. So we now have a little girl named Athena. She's a tuxedo cat, and this morning she is getting all of her shots and being spayed and all those good, responsible things that we do as her people, so that we can bring her back home in a good way and have her safe and sound and well taken care of. So that's how we started our day out today, taking care of Athena and noticing the autumn colors on the way home. We live here in Michigan, and the trees are beginning to turn color, all of the beautiful hues of auburn and burgundy and gold lining the tops of the trees now. It's absolutely spectacular. And as I begin the show this morning, I'd like to remind each and every one of you that we do have a chat room, and you are welcome to join me in the chat room if you become a follower of, hey, Lady Hawk, it's good to see you. If you become a follower of the show via Spreaker, in other words, if you visit Spreaker.com and you look up Temple Within Radio and Media, you can follow the shows and make it into the chat room where we can chat. Good morning, Lady Hawk. Typing into the room there. It's good to see you there this morning. Today we're talking about darkness and reflection, autumn. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, this is autumn, the time of the deep harvest, the time of taking a look at what it was that we planted in the springtime and what it was that we nurtured over the summer months. And here we find ourselves at the time of the harvest, where we really take a good, deep, hopefully a good and deep reflective tone in our lives, or we can take a look at what's been going on since last winter. Here in the north, in the northern part of Grandmother Earth, the Northern Hemisphere, the days become shorter and the nights become longer. And we all know, I think most of us know, at least those of us that have been around the sun enough times, have celebrated enough evolutions around the sun, enough birthdays, know that it's also the time where we go dark within. In other words, where we spend more time reflecting. Perhaps we slow down earlier in the evening rather than working until the sun goes down. Maybe we start then, just like the season itself, we begin to settle down a little earlier in the evening when it becomes darker. Todd said last night, I think we're already moving into our winter routine by being a little more laid back already at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, rather than going until 9, 10 o'clock at night. The autumn of our life, the autumn season, for me, represents the direction of the West on the medicine wheel, on the Chongleshka, the medicine wheel. The direction of the West represents reflection, introspection. It represents taking a look, taking a deep look, remembering. Good morning, Robin. Good to see you in the chat room as well. Thank you for joining Catherine and I in the chat room. The direction of the West, for me on the medicine wheel, is the color black. And it represents the ancestors, the ancestral teachings, learning, wisdom. It represents allowing the wisdom of our lifetime to present itself. Sometimes 2020 doesn't happen until many years later because perhaps we haven't taken the time to sit down and reflect on what it is that we've been through, what it is that we've passed through, or sometimes what it is that we've been initiated into. The ancestors say to us, if you sit for a moment, we'll speak. Our own journey, our own initiations, our own wisdom says, stop for a moment and be. The autumn says, slow down, begin to wind down, be. Listen to yourself, integrate what it is that you've passed through this spring and summer, right? The direction of the west also represents the coming of all things passing. In other words, the death without dying. The autumn, when we take the time to reflect and to be and to think and feel what it is that we've walked through, what our journey has led us through in spring and summer. The autumn says, let's integrate what it is that we need to keep, but let's let go of those things that no longer serve. Let's prepare to let those things die, to let them pass, to let them go. And I think, one of my favorite allusions about autumn really is looking at the leaves on the trees, at least here in Michigan. Watching the leaves on the trees begin to ripen. Autumn is about ripening. It's about harvest. It reminds me to sit down and think about those things that the journey has had me pass through or what the journey has brought to me. And to let those things ripen within me. Isn't it amazing how we can be so frenetic in our human experience that we run from one experience to the next, to the next, to the next, without really stopping to reflect upon what it is that we've experienced, what it is that life has brought to us, what friendship has brought to us, what the soul has brought to us. We can be so frenetic, watching the leaves change very slowly, watching them ripen, watching all of the fruit and the vegetables in my garden next to the School of Sacred Studies, to watch them ripen and to watch them slowly drop to the ground, the tomatoes that have not yet been picked, or the blueberries that are still on the blueberry bushes, the sage that's getting ready to hibernate. Watching everything ripen around me reminds me that it's good for me to allow things within me to ripen. And watching those leaves ripen and then slowly fall to the ground reminds me, now that I've allowed things to ripen within my life, within my heart, my mind, my emotions, it's also time to let go of those things that no longer nurture what comes next. What it is that doesn't belong nourishing the soil of winter, so that in the spring a wonderful foundation of nourishing experiences that have been integrated into my life, right? Make for wonderful soil for the springtime planting of what it is that my heart and my soul, my mind, my body needs for next year. The leaves on the trees, the acorns falling to the ground, and watching the squirrels here in the enchanted forest grab a hold of those acorns and go and nest with them, collect them and nest away with them. Isn't it interesting how nature reflects to us our own inner psyche, our own inner pool? And I think to myself, which of my experiences am I nesting away within my own heart and mind, because they've become nuggets, they've become treasures, they've become things that have enhanced my life, that are helping me to become more of who I am and who I intended to be. The nuggets, the acorns of wisdom that I'm storing away for future use. The acorns of wisdom that are not yet wisdom, but they're bits of knowledge that perhaps I've gained over the course of the last winter and then spring and summer. And maybe with the coming of winter months, that nugget of knowledge will become my wisdom as it really ripens in the darkness, toward the end of autumn. I'm always amazed in the winter to see how many autumn leaves, frankly, are still hanging on the trees. Right? It's as though they're afraid to take the leap of faith and fall, knowing that they're going to be nourished, going back into Grandmother Earth, being nourished and being transformed into nourishing soil. Those leaves that continue to hang on the tree, just so fearful of letting go. Also, remind me, they say, hey, Dana, so what is it that you're so afraid of letting go of? What are you holding on to that you need to let go of so that it can return to all things that have ever been? Or what things are you afraid to let go of so that they can be nourished and come about in another way? Darkness and reflection. Darkness is also bear medicine. Medicine of the bear going within. Mato Wakan, the holy bear. Mato Wakan Oyate, the holy bear nation. Says it's good to sleep. It's good to rest. It's good to go within. Boy, in our humanness, we can be so busy that for sometimes, and I know that some of you can relate to this, sometimes we can actually feel guilty about resting, right? I grew up in a family where working was the number one priority. Everybody, my dad, he worked and he worked and he worked. And as a result, I am, some would say, a workaholic. I'm working on that, though. I'm working on not being so much of a workaholic. And in order to do that, those of you that are listening and thinking, I'm a workaholic, how often do we find ourselves then autumn kicks in, the days become shorter, the nights become longer, 5 o'clock it's dark, and we feel guilty about putting down the work, about putting our feet up and maybe sitting still for a moment. It's also darker longer in the morning. And so sometimes we can feel guilty about getting up and just stretching and pouring an extra cup of coffee and just being for a moment in the darkness, alone with ourselves and our thoughts and our experiences. We didn't come here to the earth plane, I don't believe, for work alone. I believe that we also came here to enjoy life. Hello, Margaret Marchwinski and Nikki Jorgensen. You made it. I'd like to thank you all, before we continue, for joining me in this platform. Any of you that really, that know me, know that this format for me to present is much more comfortable for me. I am not a person who likes my photograph taken. Actually, getting up in front of large crowds is something that I do in my life, but it's not my favorite thing to do. And sitting in front of a video camera is certainly not anything that I really enjoy. And so as I was coming into the autumn season and reflecting, I thought, Dana, why don't you do what it is that your soul is more comfortable with? And that is speaking, from this place without worrying about all of the technicalities of being live and on video and all of that good kind of a thing. And I know that it's been a learning curve for all of us to go from Blog Talk Radio to Be Live TV, and here we are back at Spreaker, which will be my main format now from here on out at Temple Within Radio and Media. Once in a while I may do a Facebook live stream, but Be Live TV has been let go of. That's one of the things that I let go of in the beginning of autumn. And I'm really grateful for those of you that have taken the time to look me up on Spreaker and whatever it is that has to be done to follow the show and to come into the chat room. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Every so often we're called to review what it is that we're doing in our lives. And recently I was called to review what it is that goes on at the Temple Within and all of the companies associated with the Temple Within. And in that review, like the autumn leaves, some things have ripened to its fullness and it's time to let them go. It's time to let them go so that they can become fertile once again in the soil, right? Let that leaf go. See how it transforms itself in the soil of what's next and how it appears in its next evolution with me. Whenever the seasons change, I really take a look at what that season represents, not only on the medicine wheel of life, but what it represents in the season of life that I am as a 55-year-old woman. Some would say that that's autumn, heading into winter. And I believe that to be true. And at 55 years old, in the autumn of my life, reflection, introspection, going into the deep places to decide what it is that has ripened, what it is in my life that I have let over ripen. And frankly, it has become sour. Perhaps it has become rotten, right? Hanging there on the vine, dangling from the tree. And what is it that has held those things to me? What is it within me that has allowed those things to ripen beyond usefulness, ripen beyond being healthy? And to deal with that, to look at that, to work through that, and to heal those things. And then to let them go back into the fertile soil of the cosmic consciousness of my life, into the Akashic records, call it what you will, to prepare for what's next. On the Changleshka, the medicine wheel, the direction of the north, red, that's what's next. But right now is the harvest. And what is it that I've learned in these last 3 seasons that I wish to keep in my life? What are the gifts that the ancestors have brought to me? What are the gifts that my friends have brought into my life? What gifts have I shared with others? It's not a one-way street. The sacred hoop, the Changleshka, is something that's always moving, and we're part of that. So I ask myself as well in this time of darkness and reflection, what is it that you've given, Dana? What is it that you've given to others, that you've shared with others? And hopefully I have a few answers to that for myself, and if I don't, then I really need to rethink. What is it that I'm giving to add to the harvest? What is it that I'm sharing to add to the harvest? To add to the global harvest, right? To the community called the human race. What am I giving to help ripen, something really good out there in the world? This is the time of, the other night Todd and I were watching this great movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas. If you've not seen that movie, and if you're a person who enjoys Christmas, I highly recommend it. It is a delightful movie, and I've always been enamored with the movie The Christmas Carol, or A Christmas Carol. I have a couple copies of the book here. I have an original Martin Chuzzlewit by Mr. Dickens here in the home. I've always been a huge fan of Charles Dickens. This is the time really when the ghost of Christmas past comes to visit, in that sometimes shadowy things pop up in the darkness right now, the darkness of our psyche. And maybe, like Nikki is saying, she's a workaholic too. Maybe it's that shadow that comes to visit and says, look at all that you've missed out on by being a workaholic. What about the people in your life that have been neglected or feel neglected? My daughter has always been the person, well, so is my son, frankly, both of my kids. Mom, can you slow down? Mom, do you have time to blah? In fact, my son called me yesterday, Dave, and said, hey, Ma, how about if I take you to breakfast on Friday so we can just sit and visit? We're both really busy people. I said, absolutely, I will clear the decks to have breakfast with my son, who's going to be 29 years old. Autumn says, what about those people? What about what you've missed out on? What were you not able to harvest? And sometimes the reflection of workaholism or any other addiction can come to visit us in the darkness. See, in the darkness is where all of the ghosts appear, right? All of those things that have been hiding when we're talking about the harvest. And those things that should have been harvested. Sometimes the ghost of the past says, you know, I've been hanging out on this tree as a leaf over here on your tree of life, right? Our tree of life is amazing, the world tree, our own personal world tree. We have these leaves that perhaps have been over-ripening, and the ghost of all of those memories or those experiences that are hanging on the tree because we didn't let them go in seasons past, those leaves, those specters come to visit us and say, are you ready to let me go now? Are you ready, Dana, to let the need to work continuously, you're ready to let that go now so that you can spend time with the people, including yourself, right? Sometimes we work so hard so we don't even have to take a look at ourselves. There are so many ghosts and specters still hanging on our own tree of life. Autumn invites us to take a look at those, to make friends with them. Isn't it amazing how sometimes those old leaves that are still dangling on the tree, we let them dangle on the tree because frankly we don't want to take a look at them. And as they continue to ripen on our own tree of life, they can take on monstrous proportions. And pretty soon a little tiny bud becomes a gigantic maple tree on our tree of life. And it becomes huge until we take the moment in an autumn of our lives and say, I'm going to take a look at that leaf right now. And we come to find out that it's not nearly as big as we thought it was, as it was flapping in the breeze from years ago. Take a closer look at that great big huge maple leaf, and what we find is something that perhaps we could have let go a long time ago, but perhaps we weren't ready and maybe we weren't in the place to let it go. Because we can also be really hard on ourselves. Why can't I let that go? Why can't I move through that? It keeps coming to visit me and I just can't let it go. What's wrong with me? Everything happens, I believe, in the perfect time. And if it's avoidance, then I just, urge everybody to take a look this autumn at what's ready to be harvested, which leaves on your tree of life are ready finally to be let go of, to return to the soil of your soul and to wherever it needs to go so that new things can bud and blossom. Because if your tree of life, if the tree of your life is so stuffed full of old leaves, moldy leaves, you ever seen old moldy leaves hanging on a tree? If your tree of your life is full of moldy old leaves, crinkly old, wrinkled up, dried up leaves, then there is no room for budding in the spring. Right? If you're not going to let those things fall into the fertile winter, they are not going to have any room on your life tree, the tree of your life, for fresh blossoms. The wisdom of Mother Nature is that we are connected to it. Even if we don't believe it or not, we are connected to the seasons of Grandmother Earth. Because sometimes we do forget we are on a planet that is right now, as we are all visiting, hurling throughout time and space. Think about that. Right now, we are hurling through time and space, out there in the cosmos. We are moving. We are cosmic, having our way on this blue-green planet that we call Unchimaka, Grandmother Earth, Gaia. And as we're hurling through the stars, through the vast expanse of creators, universes within universes within universes, in our own little tiny speck, it reminds me of Horton Hears a Who, right? Horton Hears a Who. A lot of times, just like Horton hearing a who, we hear all of the little voices of the things that we need to let go of so that we can embrace the new. We can embrace the new, what comes next on the journey. Here at the Temple Within and my partnership with the magnificent artist David Fix, our company together is called The Mystic's Heart. We are getting ready to release a new book by Reverend Carl Franklin called The Earth's Ascension and the Planet Nibiru. I'm going to be putting something up today about the fact that the pre-sale of this book begins on October 8th. Through October 24th. Why the 8th through the 24th? New moon to full moon. New moon to full moon. Working with the seasons, working with the phases of the moon. It is amazing how much more smoothly our human existence works and moves and has its way when we are cognizant of the seasons, because everything that happens above us, below us, around us is happening within us. Some people will say that they get kind of depressed this time of the year when it gets dark. I believe the reason for depression during the darker times of the year is because all of those leaves that are still hanging on our tree are knocking on our soul saying, are you ready to take a look? And that's what can bring about the blues and depression, is not wanting to take a look at those leaves that are dangling on the tree of our life, that have over-ripened or are ripened, or frankly are just rotting on the vine, rotting on the branch. Our spiritual ascension, that's what we're going through right now, everybody. There is a magnificent spiritual ascension that is happening here on planet Earth, also Nibiru. It cracked me up on Sunday evening. Catherine Skaggs, if you happen to be listening, we were having a bit of dinner and she looked at me and she said, so what do you know about the planet Nibiru? And I said, why are you asking? And she said, well, my soul is really familiar with Nibiru. I'm just wondering what you know. And I said, well, funny you should ask. The Mystic's Heart Publishing is getting ready to publish a book by Carl Franklin called The Earth's Ascension and the Planet Nibiru. She looked at me and she said, you just can't make that shit up, can you? And I said, no, you can't. Everything in perfect timing. Conversations in perfect timing. The Mystic Travels is now the Temple Within Travels. That had ripened. The Mystic Travels ripened to its fullness with so many blessings. And it's in its next incarnation. It's now the Temple Within Travels. And Catherine Skaggs and I have agreed that she and I will co-facilitate trips together around the globe, beginning with Peru. In 2020. Next year, Amantha Murphy and I are collaborating with a trip to Ireland for those that are her shamanic students. Everything comes to a ripeness. Our companies, the Mystic Travels company is no more. The Temple Within Travels now is. Blessing what has been, integrating what we've learned, and allowing what we've learned and what has been to become the new, or not at all, is keeping up with the cycles of our lives, the cycles of all things. The season of autumn, of the ancestors, of the Thunder Nation, Wakian Oyate, Tashunke Oyate, the Horse Nation, Tatanka Oyate, the Buffalo Nation. What have you given in order to now receive? Some people find themselves at autumn and they feel as though they're harvesting nothing. There is nothing there for them to harvest. And I ask the question, what did you give in order to receive? What did you give in order to receive? Years ago, Harvey Gainey, who owns a large trucking company here in West Michigan, said to me, Denise, you cannot outgive God. It's absolutely impossible. He said, try it sometime. He's right. You cannot outgive the Creator. If you're feeling that there's a lack of harvest, what did you give? And how did you give it? If we give freely, we receive freely. If we give with strings attached, That's something entirely different. So how did you give in order to receive? How did you give in order to receive? And sometimes what we receive back, what we harvest, aren't outward accolades. It's a feeling in the soul of, I did good. I did good. That felt really good. The autumn of our lives as men and women, at 55, sometimes we can find that our pool of friends, or what we consider to be friends, has dwindled. On purpose, we find ourselves wanting to be perhaps more sequestered, more choosy about who we spend time with, what we spend time with, how we spend our time. This is the time of the year when we take stock of those things. How are we spending our energy? How are we spending our love? How have we spent our love? And are we going to spend our love in that same way going forward? With that, everyone, thank you for joining me this morning on Exploring Sacred. Thank you for joining me at the Temple Within, the School of Sacred Studies, Temple Within Travels, Temple Within Publishing. And thank you for sharing yourself with me, because when I look and when I reflect, one of those things in autumn that I am most grateful for is truly each and every one of you, and the light and the joy and the gifts that you bring to Grandmother Earth and all who reside upon her, within her, and above her. Blessings be, everybody. Get out there and shine.
You are listening to Exploring Sacred with your host, Denise Ivana Francisco, on the Temple Within Radio and Digital Media Network, giving voice to the sacred.